looking for the green light, which has been given. And it is showtime here with a flooded strand. Sacrifice that right away. I have to imagine for a Plains and favorite hoplite if he's sacking on turn 1 like this.
Most likely, yeah, that is the only one drop in his deck.
And there's the hoplite. As that will shuffle up, and it'll be Paul Green's turn here in just a moment. I think, it's maybe time to have an intervention with Joe.
No, I just like these whiteboarded lands. I would never play with them. But I can appreciate someone with a consistent style. That means a lot to me. So, no, it's not for me. No, it should not be for you listening at home. But I can appreciate that someone has a style.
Shivan Reef. And a passing the turn there for Green and attack for 1. Joe without a second land. Oof. And wow. Well, okay then. That is an interesting little turn here. And a fine strike here before Paul does have to discard. And we'll head back Joe's way. Both these players maybe kept a little bit of a sketcher. Now you can see Paul's hand. I mean, he does have 2 copies of Seeker of the Way in his hand.
Well,
so
Seeker of the Way is very good in the matchup, don't get me wrong, but I don't think you can keep it off of Shivan Reef. If his lane was Battlefield Forge or Mystic Monastery, you could talk me into it. But it's not that he has to draw a second land, he needs to draw a specific second land.
He does have a copy of Lightning Strike too, though favorite hoplite has just worked its way out of Lightning Strike range. And Joe will draw a card. Joe's looking for a second land. Joe has found a second land in the Plains. And now here's an attack for 4 points of damage. 2 +1/+1 counters from Heroic, 1 for base power, and 1 from Defiant Strike. We'll put Green down to 15. Green has found his land. This is a Seeker of the Way, and that's a card that's going to try to turn around the game.
It's one of the most important, if not the most important card in the Jeskai token deck in the matchup.
Mana Confluence to draw. So Joe's up and running now. Let's see what he can do with it. Heliod's Pilgrim in hand. Also a Feat of Resistance there, so plenty to do here now that he does have mana to work with. I'll just be an Aqueous form. That'll trigger Heroic as well. Joe will have to take 1 to cast it. That's his favorite hoplite. Works its way up to a 4/5. Little scry action here. Heliod's Pilgrim's going to go to the bottom.
Now the big question is, at what point does Joe feel like he has enough of a board where he can sit on Feat of Resistance for the entire game? I think that he feels like he can't do that right now. And the only thing he has to worry about is untap land into Jeskai Charm, blowing everything up right now. So he's going to take the risk and tap out for Hero of Iroas, hope he gets untapped, and then protect the hoplite with Feat of Resistance the rest of the way through.
It is a touch risky. See if it comes back to hurt him at all. There's a Lightning Strike's going to go after the hero. That'll trigger Prowess, as well as a lifelink there on the Seeker. Apollo gain 3 life. Deal Joe 3 points of damage. It's 13 to 15 in favor of Lossett, as Lossett will take his 4th turn of the game. God's willing to draw. Here's an attack. Little scry action. Battlewise Hoplite's going to go to the bottom. 4 damage will come across. Green's going to go down to 9. Joe will take 1 to play Battlewise Hoplite with God's Willing available and just pass the turn back.
I was about to mention, Joe's draw this turn was God's Willing, which gives him a much better line of play. I think he was contemplating, do I need to tap out for Heliod's Pilgrim here? Is this my only opportunity to do so? But now, with God's Willing protection and then untapping into Feat of Resistance, he can afford to just ignore the Heliod's Pilgrim for the time being and do some other things with his mana.
The tough part here for Paul is something like a Whirling Outburst, which he'd have to actually take 2 to cast, given that he has Battlefield Forge and a Shivan Reef as resources of mana. That's not something that's going to stabilize the board right now, given that Aqueous form providing unblockability.
The other problem here is that if he taps out pre-combat for something, Joe now has the luxury of saying, I'll block with Battlewise Hoplite and use a God's Willing, get your Seeker off the table, which is the biggest threat right now, and threaten lethal very soon.
Yeah. So there's Whirling Outburst. 3 Goblin tokens will come into play. Here comes the Seeker. We might see that exchange here from Joe very quickly, which is cast God's Willing on the Battlewise Hoplite, trigger the Heroic, becomes a 3/3, get the scry a couple times, and get to eat the Seeker, and it doesn't gain any life.
Exactly, and then you have a 2-turn clock in play that's unblockable with Feat of Resistance backup. A very good setup here for Joe.
And that's the exchange we're going to see right now. A little scry action, of course. Thanks to Battlewise Hoplite and God's Willing. Looks like he's going to keep it maybe on top. Looks like he's deciding to go to the bottom. Now God's Willing will resolve, so Joe gets a scry off of that now too. That card's going to stay on top. And a passing of the turn, so great turn there for Joe.
And I think that Paul may not even get to untap here because I believe Feat of Resistance plus Defiant Strike will result in the kill.
And there is Feat of Resistance here.
Excuse me, the Defiant Strike not even required here.
Yeah, the one creature's unblockable. Feat of Resistance makes the other one unblockable there in Battlewise Hoplite, and that should be more than enough to get the job done. There are the attacks, and that is going to do it. Joe Lossett's going to win game number 1 here over Paul Green. White Blue Heroic up a game over Jeskai Tokens. Pretty easy stuff there for Joe.
Yep, I mean, he did mulligan, but and stumble a little bit. He missed the second land drop, but Paul did the same thing. And by the time Paul was able to get something going, Joe had already made something way too large and was able to protect it with God's Willing.
Time to take a look at the sideboards. We will start with Jeskai Tokens. You will find 4 copies of Disdainful Stroke, 2 End Hostilities, an Arc Lightning, Anger of the Gods, 2 Erase, 2 Glare of Heresy, a Negate, a Keranos, God of Storms, and a Prognostic Sphinx as far as options are concerned here for Paul.
So I think you're going to see a swap into a control deck. I don't know how I feel ultimately about the Jeskai Token deck having this sort of package, but if you're going to have it, you're going to be bringing it in here. So the 2 copies of End Hostilities, the Arc Lightning, and the Anger of the Gods, the 2 copies of Glare of Heresy, and the 1 Negate. I mentioned before yesterday, I actually don't like Erase in this matchup because so many of the enchantments in the Heroic deck either generate value when they come into play or sacrifice themselves very quickly. So I think Erase is dubious. People do bring it in, and it has moments of being good, but overall, I would leave it in the sideboard. That said, Negate is very good, as it's very good at, of course, countering enchantments that are on the stack.
Other side of things, we have Lossett with his different take and a spicy one in his sideboard.
A Spectre Ward in Johnny's Presence, a Lagonovan Trailblazer, an Ordeal of Heliod, a Moral Obstinacy, and Erase, 2 Treasure Cruise, 3 Stubborn Denial, 4 Glare of Heresy. I think you're going to see a lot of Glare of Heresies come in, a lot of Stubborn Denials. The Treasure Cruises are justifiable too here if you're expecting Paul to convert into a control route. I think the Lagonovan Trailblazer is a nice stable creature to put enchantments on. 4 times this is very nice against a deck with a lot of red removal. That said, all of that in sum is a lot of cards to bring in. I don't know if Joe has that much room unless he's making some pretty significant swaps and cutting some of the other creatures out of his deck. So we'll see momentarily, but Joe with a lot of good options, but I'm not sure if he can really afford to sideboard in 9 or 10 cards.
We will discuss regionals now as these players do get ready for game number 2. February 7th, it's going to be here sooner than you think. And if you're not qualified for Pro Tour Fate Reforged, well, you can do battle.
Yep, dates have already been announced, as have the venues. You can check it out here or head over to StarCityGames.com/regionals. Get all that information. Keep in mind, a free playmat to the first 200 people who register for each of these regionals. Winter Regionals again, February the 7th, Pro Tour weekend. StarCityGames.com/regionals for more information.
All the squirrels are together there on the playmat. Force of Squirrel, Squirrel Storm, Acorn Mystic, and Squirrel Confidant. Gonna be sweet to see what we come up for the creature collection this year. I don't know if we're gonna stay with the squirrel theme. Maybe we'll branch out. But for now, we know that you can get this playmat free and exclusive to the first 200 players that do go to Winter Regionals. Plant your flag, February 7th, find a location near you at StarCityGames.com/regionals. As we do turn our attention back to game number 2 here for Joe Lossett, number 6 on our Open Series leaderboard here for season number 1. Looking to get those points, work his way back towards the Players' Championship.
And Joe is a player I would anticipate competing in the Southern California regionals.
Yes.
We might have to battle.
Okay, shots fired.
Yeah.
Do you have something that can take down Heroic?
Probably a lot of shocks and magma sprays.
I don't think that's going to get the job done.
Oh, I think it does.
I'm a little skeptical. Just a touch.
Just a lot cheap removal, the same recipe that Mardu has.
Oh, if you want to play Mardu, maybe you can play Kraken.
No.
Oh, you don't want to play Mardu?
No, I do not. I think the Abzan and the Sultai matchups are too bad.
Well, to be fair, by the time Regionals is firing away, we'll be able to play with some new cards.
That is true.
So maybe that changes some things.
Whole new world. Could be some new enchantments, could be some new red beaters.
Hope Mardu gets a little bit of spice. That's what I'm hoping for. There's just a little something extra. It needs a little kick. Not sure exactly what it is, but it needs a little bit of kick. Maybe a better 2-drop. I don't like Seeker of the Way in that deck.
No, I do not either.
Just give me Thundermaw Hellkite back. That's probably a terrible idea.
You can play with Stormbreath Dragons. This is
No.
Sarkin.
Nope.
It's all the same card.
No, they're not. There's only one Thundermaw. Or give me Falconwrath Aristocrat back with all those
Okay,
tokens.
Falconwrath
How about that?
Aristocrat would be super good in that deck.
Even though Butcher the Horde is something, so they don't really need that probably. But this is why I'm not in game design.
They're too similar. They occupy the same
This is why I
space.
don't do design. I don't really even know what I'm talking about.
It's my central critique of Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise. I mean, whether or not they're too powerful, kind of a separate argument. But I believe they're just too similar to appear in the same set.
Sure. Perhaps Dig Through Time should have been the common. No, that's not true.
Probably just don't print Treasure Cruise, I think. Because Dig Through Time does promote some pretty cool deck building, some pretty sweet moments, and it's also a rare. Sweet, attractive rares help promote sales. No one's bought a booster pack looking for a Treasure Cruise. You know?
I suppose that's true.
Unless they showed up to the tournament short a Treasure Cruise and had to start buying boosters to find it. Which happened to me once at an Invitational, but with Walking Corpse instead of Treasure Cruise.
Were you able to find it?
Eventually, well, my first pack had a Liliana the Veil, which I was able to cash in for like 12 packs or something.
Oh, keep it going.
I just went off.
Nice. Nice.
I had like 20 rares and my Walking Corpse by the end of it.
Very nice. You beat the system.
Yep. And then I cashed the invitation. I mean, it was just perfect.
Yeah. Just how you drew it up.
Exactly.
What a weekend. Tranquil Cove going to bring Lossett up to 21. Green started things off with the Temple of Triumph. Second land is a Shivan Reef, and there's a Secret away. That's the important one.
And I'm not sure how many copies of Glare of Heresy Joe brought in, but if I was in his spot, I would almost want it more for this card than just Guy's Ascendancy. This card is really problematic, especially when Paul's on the play, because Joe's game plan basically is just damage racing. It's almost exclusively that, and Secret of the Way makes it really challenging.
Joe going to go down a little bit here to 19, thanks to a Flooded Shrine. Gets Plains out of his deck. Actually, going to stay at 20, excuse me. Tranquil Cove did start things off, so here's a Battle-Wise Hot Plate. We're going to head back Paul's way now, see what he can put together in his third turn of the game. Maybe a little Ascendancy action, perhaps a Rabble Master. His third land looks to be one that comes into play tapped, though. Looks like he has two different temples to choose from in Epiphany and Triumph. He does also have a mountain. So he can Rabble Master it up if he'd like this turn. Some real options here for Paul. You see him taking his time.
And this is a spot where I think that Paul could open up the turn by attacking with the Seeker, even if he doesn't have a spell in his hand, because I just don't think Joe can afford to block with his hot play. His creatures are too valuable.
There's the attack. 2 damage is going to come across. The follow-up is Rabble Master. Pass the turn back. Paul wanting to make sure he gets those 2 damage across. Mana Confluence looks to be the draw here for Joe, or at least his third land. Secret away in hand. Looks like at least one copy of Ordeal of Heliod as well, so some options here for Joe in his third turn of the game.
And it's a strange position. Joe's hand is flush enough with creatures that he may be willing to trade.
There's Aqueous Form. That'll trigger Heroic, so Battle-Wise Hot Plate will become a 3-power creature. Little scry action here from the Heroic trigger. Top card going to become the bottom one now. Aqueous Form will resolve. And we're going to be in a race situation. Very reminiscent of what we saw with Man versus Comparons a little earlier today.
And generally speaking, favors the player on the play in this matchup.
Yeah.
And Paul has the really powerful opening on the play of Seeker and Rabble Master.
And Hostilities in hand too, as a reset button in case anything goes wrong. Joe going to play Mana Confluence. This will be a favorite hot play. And passing the turn back over to Green. Green will draw. Copy of Raise the Alarm. Now it's time for a little Goblin action here in Hordling Outburst. 3 Goblins will come into play. Of course, that'll trigger Prowess there for the Seeker of the Way.
This is still quite a risky attack here from Paul, as if Joe has Defiant Strike, a lot of bad stuff happens.
Yeah, there's a lot that could have gone wrong there on that particular attack as far as Rabble Master is concerned. And for Seeker too, but everything worked out just fine. The Goblin did get blocked by favorite Hoplite. tempo and a passing of the turn. So you see the way ordeal of Thassa in Lossett's hand. Hero of Iroas as well, but he is certainly behind in this game. He's got some real catching up to do, but Heroic's not a deck that really plays defense very well.
No, neither deck does. You know, Joe's got to find a way to get into 2-spell a turn territory. He does have, for example, Hero of Iroas and Ordeal of Heliod here. He will be shields down if he goes down that road. A lot of bad stuff can happen, but I don't know if he has the luxury of doing anything else.
Now there's the hero. Of course, this will make the ordeals cheaper. Magic Influence damage will certainly add up this game, though. Lossett going to go down to 11, it looks like. See which ordeal he wants to cast. And there's Ordeal of Thassa. Trigger the Heroic on Battlewise Hoplite. Top card's going to go to the bottom. Now Ordeal will resolve. Now it's time to attack. So a couple of triggers. Joe's going to resolve the Scry first. And then he'll resolve the Ordeal of Thassa trigger, which of course will grant Battlewise Hoplite another +1/+1 counter and 2 cards. But again, I'm not entirely sure Lossett can work his way out of the situation that he's currently in.
Well, if he's doing Ordeal of Thassa this turn instead of Ordeal of Heliod, even though there's a risk of him dying, he is definitely just looking for more mana.
Yeah. Also got to do more per turn if he can. Gonna go back Green's way. If he couldn't see his hand, Hordeling Outburst has been added to it. There's also a Raise the Alarm there. He's gonna cast the Outburst right now. That'll trigger, of course, the Seeker. One thing to keep in mind is that Green does have a copy of Erase in his hand as well. And with that one stray mana left over, that could play a big role in things.
Definitely. I mean, that's the one. The Aqueous form is the one really sweet target here, and if Joe is trying to go for Ordeal of Heliod next turn, that could also be very powerful.
Hero of Iroas is going to jump in front of Goblin Rabblemaster. Favorite Hoplite. Looks like it's going to jump in front of something. It is a 1/2 after all, so a block on a Goblin does seem pretty appealing. Though it could be interested in chump blocking Seeker of the Way, which is currently a 3/3 attacker. So you can see the power of Jeskai tokens here. Its ability to just clutter up the board and attack for large amounts of damage with or without Ascendancy. Though it does get a lot easier with its namesake card.
And with Paul having the ability here to remove the Aqueous form, he has a lot of control over the damage race.
Yeah, Erase plays such an interesting role in this matchup. I don't think it's great after sideboard, but I think there are instances where it is very good, and I think this is one of them.
Yeah, this is the moment that you want it. You know, to stop an Ordeal of Heliod right before it's about to trigger.
Looks like he's going to use an Erase right now. And he will, so there goes Aqueous form. How do you feel about using it on this turn to get that extra point of damage across?
I'm not a big fan of it because there's so many things that can go wrong now, where there's one scenario where Joe would have attacked, assuming that his creature's unblocked. You get him inside of combat, and now he's down a blocker, and you just get to chump block. So it possibly compels Joe to just hang back on defense with his 5/5, which is maybe not what you want. The other thing is now if there's another Ordeal, particularly Ordeal of Heliod, now all of a sudden it's triggering instead of not.
Sure. And that 10 life could be the difference in the
It's a
game.
huge deal. I mean, Joe's at 4 right now.
Oh, Joe's draw for the turn was a copy of Defiant Strike. And here comes Ordeal of Heliod. At least it looks that way. So that'll target the Battlewise Hoplite, of course. That'll trigger Heroic, so a little scry action here. Battlewise Hoplite is the card Joe's looking at. Quickly goes to the bottom. Ordeal of Heliod will resolve. So Battlewise Hoplite currently is a 6/6. The attack will make it a 7/7. And Lossett will gain 10 life. He's going up to 14.
I'm pretty sure having gained the amount of life that Paul gained last turn, he would have preferred to blow up this Ordeal rather than do anything with the Aqueous form.
Sure.
So already some consequences for that play.
You can see where he's coming from with wanting to deal that additional point of damage, but not entirely sure it's important in that situation.
Gains a point of life. I understand that there's definitely some arguments for making that play, but I think on the balance, he's better served just waiting for combat to occur. You work with more information and you might get Joe to mess up.
Seeker the way the draw to go along with the raise the alarm and hostilities in hand.
And now Paul's back in the scenario where Defiant Strike is really bad for him.
There's a block. Joe going to see if he's going to make a move, and he will. There's raise the alarm. That'll make the Seeker a little bit bigger, but Joe does have Defiant Strike in hand, and that's important, as you mentioned, because not only will it trigger Heroic, but the +1 that it gives makes it so the favorite hoplite will be a 3/3 in combat. And that beats Seeker the way in this instance.
Yeah, and Joe's got a lot of cushion to work with as well in terms of his life total here. I mean, he's taking some damage, but he's likely to be able to block out a next turn as well, even if he keeps attacking with the Battle-Wise hoplite.
We can't forget, too, favorite hoplite. It's Heroic. Not only does it get a +1/+1 counter, but damage dealt to it, well, it doesn't take anything. So 2 3/3s run into each other, but all the damage is prevented. So favorite hoplite wins this battle.
Yeah, it's not even a trade.
Now, Lossett does have to take 1 from casting the Manic Influence, and also take some damage from those goblins. So he's not out of the woods yet, but if he's able to maybe find another copy of Ordeal of Heliod, life's pretty good.
Absolutely. I mean, even if he doesn't, he's not in horrible shape if he can just put some more blockers into play.
Yeah. Though that hostilities does make things a little bit interesting there.
It does, but Joe is working with a pretty sizable advantage with cards in hand right now. So even a full reset, you know, there's going to be risk because Joe's going to be low and burn spell at the top might kill him. But in terms of just rebuilding with resources, Joe's got more to work with.
Yeah. Well, there's a Seeker of the way. Perhaps Joe's going to pump the brakes here. Yeah, and he's going to. He knows that racing right now with green at 19, probably not the best idea.
Yeah, green's got way too many jump blockers.
Picked up a copy of Goblin Rabblemaster this turn. Maybe Paul continues to try to push his advantage. Play the Rabblemaster, make a token, attack with everybody. Now, is this better than trying to set up an end hostilities, I think is the question.
Well, I think Paul's in a spot right now where he can't exactly just start saying go here. Joe's going to start overwhelming him and start getting life with the Seeker. So I think he still has to play to the board at least a little bit. And then hopefully that forces Joe to keep playing to the board. Paul gets to end hostilities with Joe at a low life total, and maybe you rip a burn spell before Joe could reassemble something of substance. But the end hostilities has definitely put him in this weird squeeze. He doesn't have a smooth game plan for how to finish off this game right now.
And hostilities maybe a break in case of emergency now, instead of maybe a game plan.
Well, I don't even know if Paul can lean that much on it, because not only is he without the 5th mana right now, he's without double white. So there's a lot of lands he draws that either come into play tapped or don't generate white mana at all. So it's very hard to lean much on that end hostilities at all, because it may be a non-player in this game.
Oh, time for Joe to do some blocking here. And now Joe does have a copy of Defiant Strike in his hand, which I think is a little bit interesting because he gets the opportunity to decide if he wants to use it now.
Well, I think there's a lot of value in getting a Seeker of the Way lifelink trigger right now with the mana that's left over on this turn, because we know Joe's bottlenecked on mana.
It looks like he's going to take the opportunity to do that. He's going to take 1 now, and then he'll cast Defiant Strike. This will, of course, trigger Seeker. Keep in mind as well, not only will it trigger Seeker, turn into a 3/3 because of prowess, but Defiant Strike giving that additional point of power makes it so that he's going to gain 4 life here.
So it's really only a net of 2 damage, 1 from the token coming through, minus the lifelink hit, minus 1 for the mana confluence. So 3 tokens down for 2 points of damage, probably an exchange that Joe's happy with. More importantly, he now gets to untap with Seeker of the Way ready to go on the offensive if he's feeling it.
The blocks are interesting there too. Joe had the opportunity to maybe eat some goblins and leave the soldiers alive, but he opted to take out the soldiers, and I think part of the reason he did that is because he wants it so that there's just 1 color of creature on the battlefield for God's Willing and Feeder Resistant. Additionally, you leave the goblins out there, the soldiers have the option to block or attack, where the goblins have no choice but to attack given the Rabblemaster.
Yeah, the only cost with leaving the goblins in play is additional +1/+0 triggers off the Rabblemaster. But Joe has so many blockers he can throw in front of the Rabblemaster that's not really a consideration. As you mentioned, getting the creatures off the table that represent a second color of creature is very valuable. Also, getting rid of the creatures that don't have to attack and may block down the line, also very good for Joe.
See, Paul wants to take a look at the graveyard, see what's going on. Aqua's form, of course, was exiled via a race. And Joe drawing an island this turn, makes it so that he has 4 lands in play right now. A lot of options at his disposal.
And the fact that it's Rabble Master is kind of nice for Joe because he's not quite in a position to attack just yet. He wants to play defense, but Rabble Master forces Paul to play offense, which plays right into Joe's hand. I mean, 2 copies of Seeker of the Way and a 7/7. That's a great board for playing defense.
There is Seeker of the Way. That's a passing of the turn. We're going to head back Paul's way. Paul will draw. Jeskai Ascendancy. That's an interesting one.
Although, again, awkward with the leftovers in Paul's hand of a creature and a 5-mana sweeper.
Probably something that you do have to cast in this situation, though. If we did get a glimpse at Lossett's hand, he does have a copy of Glare of Heresy at the ready, so not a huge problem. Additionally, Glare of Heresy will trigger Seeker of the Ways, make those on the offensive. And lastly, we can't forget those Goblin tokens. Oh, they're coming in.
They are coming in. Paul is running out of blockers. Joe's not that far away from threatening lethal on the way back. And if Paul has any trick to use inside of combat, he ends up gaining a ton of life off these Seekers.
So here come the Goblins, whether they like it or not.
I think it is not.
Is it time for a Defiant Strike yet again? Never seen Defiant Strike this good on defense before, but it has been fantastic this game.
I mean, this represents 7 points of life gain on an attack that's only for 6 to begin with in the most optimistic of scenarios.
That in hostilities may not be break in case of emergency, it may just be break.
Yeah.
So Defiant Strike's going to come in. See, Joe's going to keep track of the power of each of the Seekers there with those dice for the moment.
Yeah, he's been using the white dice to represent permanent pumps, like on the hoplites, and been using those wooden dice to represent temporary pumps from Defiant Strikes and Prowess triggers.
So he's going to take 2, but he's going to gain a whole bunch of life. The follow-up here is Jeskai Ascendancy. And that'll be it for the turn. So Losette's going to end up at 11, draws a Flooded Strand now, also has a copy of Temple of Enlightenment in hand. So a couple of lands here for Joe.
But now Joe can really go on the offensive because he's going to be able to take care of that Jeskai Ascendancy with a spell triggering Prowess and representing a large attack.
He can get hyper aggressive now because there is Glare of Heresy, trigger the Seekers. So those will be 3 power attackers with lifelink, of course. And Joe will keep track of that with those wooden dice. And hey, he can get in with everybody if he'd like. And he is certainly winning the race right now, so that's exactly what he's going to do. Favorite Hoplites are 2/3, Seekers are 3/3 with lifelink, and of course, Battle-Wise Hoplites is 7/7. And all of a sudden, if you're Paul Green, you need to draw that white source. It needs to come and play untapped. You need to cast in hostilities now.
And then be able to win against the leftovers, which there's no promise of. And again, not that many white sources of mana that come into play untapped in this deck.
Now you take a look at the mana base. There are 2 planes.
3 Flooded Strands.
Yeah, that's what I was on the search for. 3 Flooded Strands and 3 copies of Battlefield Forge.
So Paul drawing pretty slim here. And the ship has sailed on the 1 Anger of the Gods.
Oh yeah, we're way past that point.
And I like this play from Joe, not adding the Hoplite post-combat, aware that Paul's only real out here is drawing some sort of sweeper. And at that point, Joe wants to keep as many leftovers in his hand as possible.
Seeker of the Way going to come into play, pass the turn back. Paul will leave 1 in reserve. Well, he can only cast 1, I suppose, so not even leaving 1 in reserve. If you cast them both, maybe he would, but he can't. Or deal Heliod the draw. That'll really going to push Joe out of range now. We got a long game ahead of us.
I think it might be a short game unless Paul draws untapped white mana next turn.
Sure. Little scry action here for Joe. Due to the heroic trigger on Battle-Wise Hoplite. Top card is a Plains. It'll become the bottom card. Don't forget those Seekers will grow. And there is the attack of everybody once again. Ordeal will trigger. Lossett will gain 10 more life. And now it's on green to do some blocking.
And Joe, a little conservative there with that Ordeal. Could have played it on the favorite Hoplite, but didn't want to risk Lightning Strike in response.
I also think that in that situation, he just wants to scry.
Yeah, that's another factor too. I mean, it's nice to diversify your set of toughness in play in case Anger of the Gods is the draw, but if the draw is Anger of the Gods, the Battle-Wise Hoplite probably just kills Paul the following turn anyway.
Yeah.
So, a lightly conservative use of the ordeal there, but not overwhelmingly so.
See a bunch of blocks here. Joe's, of course, going to win in combat, as his creatures are quite large. Paul's going to lose a bunch of his, and now he is hoping for one of those untapped white sources, which he does not have very many of. And Joe's not going to add anything to the board, as he knows the only way he can lose this game is some sort of Wrath effect. Island is the draw, and that is going to do it. Joe Lossett's going to win this game and match over Paul Green. 2-0. White Blue Heroic will take care of Jeskai tokens. Lossett moves on to 10-2, one step closer to making elimination rounds.
And sort of a demonstration of why I personally not a huge fan of the sweeper plan out of Jeskai tokens. I think the deck is so much better playing offense than defense that the sweepers end up being pretty awkward. I like bringing in more removal spells. Copies of Glare of Heresy, those are excellent. I can easily get behind that. But trying to convert the deck into some sort of Anger of the Gods and Hostility sort of strategy is not the type of way I think the deck is well suited to play. And if you want those kind of effects, I would pursue things like